In 1897, Queen Victoria celebrated her diamond jubilee and was photographed wearing her collet diamond necklace and earrings. The estimated value today is £1.5 million. The Queen often wears the collet necklace to the state opening of Parliament. It was made in 1858, and the pendant stone is known as the Lahore diamond.
The diamond drops that are on the earrings and the drop on the bottom of the collet necklace did actually come from the Timor ruby necklace. It was given to Queen Victoria in 1851 by the East India Company. They now form part of the crown jewels.
These early images from the turn of the century capture Queen Victoria at Balmoral in Scotland. In 1911, her life was commemorated with the unveiling of a memorial statue in front of Buckingham Palace. Sitting on her throne, the old Queen is depicted wearing one of her favourite crowns. When she succeeded her uncle, King William IV, to the throne in 1837, her crown was set with stones from the reign of her ancestor, King George I. These included the Black Prince ruby and many brilliant pearls and fine sapphires. Later, she ordered a new, smaller crown to be made by Garrard's, the crown jewellers. It weighed just 4 ounces and sat neatly on the top of her head.
Queen Victoria suffered migraines in later life, and she found that the crown's far too heavy. That's why we at Garrard made the small, very, very small crown for her to wear. And she always wore it at the top of the head or at the back on the bun, with or without the arches.
Her beautiful little diamond crown, made in 1870, became the trademark for her reign, made stronger by her marriage to Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. The couple were deeply devoted to each other, and their marriage was an extremely happy one. Sadly, when Albert died, the Queen was only 42, and for the rest of her life, she cherished his wedding present to her, a big sapphire brooch clasped by a dozen diamonds. Queen Victoria called it Albert's brooch, and more than 100 years later, her great-great-granddaughter, the Queen, regularly wears it on her lapel.
The Albert brooch is a very charming piece which Prince Albert had made for Queen Victoria and gave to her on the night before the wedding when they were betrothed here in London. And it's a wonderful sapphire, and it's a beautiful piece, and I think very romantic.
Princess Elizabeth wore Albert's brooch for Princess Anne's christening at Buckingham Palace. Her mother and her grandmother, Queen Mary, had also worn it on many occasions. During a visit to her estates in the northwest of England, the Queen's tenant farmers had a close-up view of one of the most precious personal treasures from the royal jewellery collection. Its estimated value today is £150,000. A cherished memory of her great-great-grandmother. Another memento from Queen Victoria's era is her Golden Jubilee necklace from 1887, containing circles of exquisite diamonds around pearl centres with a drop pearl pendant. 50 years ago, the Queen was filmed wearing it at a film premiere. Queen Victoria's ancestor, King George IV, owned a diamond crown decorated with shamrocks, thistles, and rented gemstones. The Hanoverian king did not, in fact, wear this diadem to his coronation because it was considered too effeminate to be worn on such a grand occasion.
George IV's coronation, the new crown was made, and he was under strict orders from Parliament what he could have in his crown. So he then decided that he would have flower bouquets between the Maltese crosses. The flower bouquets represent England, Scotland, and Ireland. He didn't actually wear it for his coronation because it was considered to be too feminine. Originally, it would have been set with semi-precious stones that would have been hired from the jewellers for the coronation, because in those days they couldn't afford to have crowns and diadems set with real stones and keep them. So the jewellers came in, and they were all the jewels were hired, and sent back afterwards. If the jewels were left in the crowns, the sovereign would have pawned them, hocked them to pay gambling debts or, as turned out, mistresses in those days.
As a precaution against theft, Queen Victoria soldered her jewels onto the Hanoverian diadem, and to this day, most of them are still in place. At the annual state opening of Parliament, the Queen arrives wearing the Hanoverian diadem.
She wears it leaving Buckingham Palace, travelling in the coach to the House of Lords. She then walks up the grand staircase into the robing room where that crown, the diadem, is removed, and she then puts on the more important imperial state crown.
On her wedding day in 1947, Princess Elizabeth wore another relic from her German ancestors, the Hanoverian fringe tiara.
The tiara that Princess Elizabeth wore is known as the Hanoverian tiara, and it was in fact designed and made in 1830 for Queen Victoria. It was made of old diamonds from the time of George III, and it was creating this wonderful, quite spiky tiara, quite high, which can also be worn as a necklace, interestingly enough. The royal family are very, very, very good with their jewellery. They can be worn for lots of different things. Anyway, Queen Victoria had it made in 1830 and left it to the crown, and Queen Mary wore it. There are pictures of Queen Mary wearing it. And then Princess Elizabeth wore it for her wedding because it was lent to her by her mother. On Princess Elizabeth's wedding day, two unforeseen things occurred. One was that the beautiful Hanoverian tiara, diamond tiara, actually the frame broke, which is a nightmare situation for anybody. But of course, unlike anybody, she did in fact have the court jeweller standing by, but in his workshop. And he had to be sent for double swift to come and mend the thing. And I think she was very, very nervous and had to be reassured by her mother. And also, she wanted to wear the double row, the famous double row of pearls, which had been given to her by her parents, by her father, I think in particular, on her wedding day. And they were on display with the rest of the royal presence, which was extremely awkward. So in a London which was paralysed with traffic problems, her newly appointed private secretary, John Colville, was dispatched across London to get this priceless pearls and somehow get them back to Buckingham Palace. But he couldn't get back. Once he'd actually persuaded them to give him the pearls, I imagine sharp words were spoken, he had to commandeer one of the royal limousines belonging to King Haakon of Norway to somehow get through and give them to the bride-to-be.
On her wedding day in 1973, Princess Anne wore the Hanoverian fringe tiara, which had been lent to her by her grandmother. It had adorned many royal heads since it was originally set in diamonds more than 150 years ago. At another royal wedding in 1893, Princess Mary of Teck married the future King George V. Later, as Queen Mary, this woman would have a devastating effect on the history of the royal jewels. This tiara, a gift from the girls of Great Britain, was one of her favourite wedding presents. Bought for £5,000, its estimated value today is £500,000. Light on the head, it's easy to wear. Inherited from her grandmother, the Queen uses it constantly on official occasions. Affectionately known as Granny's tiara, it has 9 large oriental pearls on diamond spikes set on a bandeau base of 27 brilliant diamonds enclosed in a metal band.
Tiaras are a symbol of authority, a symbol of power. That's why when the Queen's wearing her crown, it makes a fact. I am the Queen, I am the head. And when a lady wears a hat, she must feel very important. Or a gentleman wears a top hat, for instance. It's a symbol of authority, of class, perhaps.